Hello, welcome to the Best of Brighton. I'm Mike Tilt. My special guest today is Kaz Scranton. You all know Mr. Scranton. Talk about him all the time once I put that picture up of him, his wife, him at school. The man was just marvelous. I never got a chance to meet him, but the stories that I've heard about him, we're going to hear about them again today with his son. So, Kaz, tell me what it was like growing up as a kid and having a father such as your father.
Well, I think the exciting part in hindsight was I was so lucky because in the summer, after my dad was athletic director and coach, and when he came to Brighton back in 52, I was born in 53, okay, was the fact that I spent summers with my dad. And a lot of times, most of my friends' dad and moms, the dads particularly worked in automobile companies, but my dad decided he was so much of a coach, he knew that it was important for kids to get involved at a young age. Mm-hmm. So by the time I was 6, 7 years old, he started a little league program where they had the little midget leagues and the kids hitting off the tee, and then at night they had the pony league. Okay. But for me, I was with him the whole time. So I'd go with him in the morning, and I'd probably played when I was that young. Mm-hmm. And then in the afternoon, we'd come home and eat lunch. My mom would have lunch ready. And then he gave swimming lessons out at Briggs Lake.
Wow.
And so kids would come out there, and he thought, here's Brighton with all these lakes, and there was no pools, high school, nobody had one, and he really thought it was important for kids to learn how to swim. Yeah. And he was a registered lifeguard instructor through Red Cross. And so I was the little snot-nosed kid that was following my dad around as he's giving lessons to these older kids, and I was just the young one, and I was there just to do whatever, come home and eat a quick dinner, and then it was up there for baseball. I was the kid back there that used to sell pop for 10 cents a bottle. And that's, and you funded it by, you bought a t-shirt for, I don't know, $2 or something. Mm-hmm. And we were the reds and the blues and the greens and
all the colors.
All those colors. And I used to joke about, I bet you by 8 years old, I could lime a baseball field.
Wow.
Because that's what he did in the afternoon after the swimming. Mm-hmm. We'd go up there, and he had an old car, had holes in the floor, and he had a piece of fencing. And he'd put a brick on that, and I got to sit on the brick, and he'd drive around in circles on the 2 baseball fields to level them out.
Wow.
And then we'd go out there, and I could, hold the stake, and finally let me walk behind the lime.
So you were grading the field.
So we were grading the field and liming it. And, in the beginning of the year, because it extended out into the football field, somebody put a picture of a post hole, the big heavy things you dropped onto a post, and then you put the fence out, a winter fence. I could hardly lift the thing up, but I was out there with other people, and he always hired high school kids. If you talk to a lot of them, like I remember the Greg Park and John Park were some of the first ones, and the dad owned the insurance agency in Brighton.
Yep, Cold Park.
Cold Park. And they were very involved, especially what I remember in the beginning, because one of them stayed here for a while. And that's what they umpired for my dad, helped him, did whatever. They were what I remember, my dad left a right-hand man, and anybody in the community, the coaches were parents, and now the real little kids, you usually got high school kids to coach them.
Right.
But everything revolved around playing baseball in
What do
the
you
summer.
think was that your dad's favorite sport? Baseball?
Growing up, I'm sure it was.
Okay.
And I say that because, you know, he graduated with his master's from the University of Michigan
Okay.
in 1950 after he got home from World War II. And huge, of course, Michigan fan. I mean,
As you are.
as I am. My dad loved basketball and knew if Brighton was going to have better basketball teams, kids needed to start at a younger age because typically
Right.
they started 7th or 8th grade.
Right.
And I love the story that, and they're true, but he wanted us to go in the gym so we'd to practice. The kids didn't have a way to get there, so he'd go and get a school bus and he'd drive around town and through the subdivisions and pick kids up
Wow.
just so we could come and practice. Now, my dad wasn't a believer in scrimmages. We did very fundamental practices. But again, that was really for 5th and 6th graders. I mean, I was in there by 2nd grade. I mean, I was that snot-nosed kid that was running around. And that's the reason it'd been a long time, the years Bob Bush, Miles of You class, that class 1970, had probably the most successful basketball teams. And part of it was as my dad started. I remember once talking about, he took the bus out and got a snowstorm and the bus got stuck.
Suck.
So what do you think we did?
Got out and pushed.
All the kids got out and pushed the bus. You know, it wasn't like call the wrecker. I mean, I'm sure
not
now.
back then, but-
I'm sure now you'd be in some sort of trouble for having kids push the bus,
Yeah, or even taking the bus out.
taking the bus. Well,
No, did he?
I don't know. It's just you did all those things
Yeah.
back through the 50s and 60s,
Right.
and he'd do anything to have kids involved, as
Right.
you can tell.
The community was.
Community was
Tight.
number one. Always belonged to the Presbyterian Church
Okay.
and was real involved with that. And my mom was probably even more than my dad. You know, taught the Sunday schools and did the deacons
Oh,
and all
okay.
that.
And your mom is still with us,
My mom is,
which is nice. She
yes,
couldn't be here today, but how is she doing?
she's doing pretty good.
Good.
She, you know, was battling the arthritis. And at 96, I guess a
Wow.
lot of us will be.
If we make 96,
Right.
we'll be lucky to make 90.
As I put it, I've been in the hospital more than she has, getting my knees replaced and my hip replaced, and
So you have both knees replaced?
just one.
Just one, okay.
Problem is, I've had 3 operations on the same knee.
Mm.
The last
Tough.
time you saw me and a lot of other
Right.
people did it, had
At
gotten
the reunion.
infected. It was all
okay.
red.
Right.
So that's what they did. They took that knee out, and for 6 weeks it was cemented in place and had antibiotics. I was in Wellbridge, and I had to wait till that got done, and they decided the infection was gone. So I'm happy to say 3 weeks ago I have a brand new knee.
Brand new knee, good deal, and you're looking a lot better.
I feel good.
Moving around. Yeah, you
I'm
look good.
nice to stand
color.
up.
I know you were struggling at the reunion,
I was.
but you know, you made the best of it, and that was a good time. It was very nice of Danny to put that on for all of you, and
Yeah, it sure was.
all of you guys were just great. I mean, so friendly, everybody in a good mood, which, you know, you're going to be at a reunion, but very good time.
Happy holidays and Merry Christmas from Big Cheese Productions. Stop in this season and find the perfect gift for your unique person. Gas pumps, neon signs, life-size statues, memorabilia, and much more. All at Big Cheese Productions. Visit the showroom and check out BigCheesePetro.com today.
So, what stands out the most about your dad? We know that he was a disciplined man. He was thoughtful. He taught many good lessons that you know, carried on in people's lives that made a difference even today. And the comments that, you know, have been made about your dad. It just, he just was a remarkable man. What's the one or two things that really stand out about your dad?
Well, let me tell you, see, I graduated from college in marketing, went into retailing. Finally decided to go back to school and be a teacher.
Okay.
41 years old, I started teaching.
Oh.
And my dad's big advice is he'd get this shit-eating looking grin on his face and said, it's about time that you made the right decision. Because he didn't, he never once said to me, you should go be a teacher. He left things open for me to grow, and I appreciate that now.
Yeah, that's the way it should be.
But his advice to me, and this is what I really was getting at, is you need to be the 3 F's. I look at him and he says, you need to be firm, fair, and friendly.
Firm, fair, and friendly.
And he says, that's what I've really always lived by. And he said, the kids really want the discipline. They don't know that.
No.
But
not when we're young.
When you're young, right. And so I think that was the biggest guidance I had. My dad had an incredible memory for people's names. I've never come close.
That's really good. I have trouble with that.
I still do. But I mean...
faces you can recognize, but the names don't always come.
I mean, one of my favorite stories was, I think, who Ralph, what is it, Steinberger?
Yeah.
And he told me a story about my dad when he'd retired, and they were in one of the local, my dad didn't really ever go out and drink in any of the local bars. He just didn't think it was appropriate. Mm. But he'd retired, and he was in there with my mom having a hamburger and a beer, I'm sure. Right. And he was in there, Ralph, and 8 of his friends. There's 8 of them all together. And he bet all the guys sitting at the table that my dad could walk over, and some of these guys had graduated 10, 15 years ago, and he could still name everybody in here. He says, so I bet them all $10. And he said, so I walked over, asked your dad if he'd come over and see if he could name anybody. Of course, again, he gets this grin on his face, walks over and names every one of them sitting there.
Wow.
And that was typical of my dad. Even to the point, till the day he died, he could tell you the name of all the nurses and the aides. He could tell you the girls' names on my golf team. I coach girls golf at Pinckney. He'd never met any of them, but I'd tell him what the scores were and stuff, because that's what he liked to talk about. I mean, the guy's now 89 years old, going to be 90. And I'm telling him the scores of these girls. I'd show up a week later. He'd ask me how this girl did and by name. Shoot, I was lucky to remember their names most of the time. So he had a real ability to remember names. But I think when I look back at his success, is he tried to treat those students and the teachers and the custodians and the bus drivers all equal. I never remember growing up, I mean, Brighton's not very culturally diverse. Is that a nice way of putting it? And I just remember that was never an issue in our family who it was. I've been thinking a lot about things to bring up, and I remember after every Brighton football game at home, after the game, my mom would, I'm sure, rush home and get food out, because the band director, Karl Klapczynski, and the football coach, whoever it was, and my dad, and there was always other people invited, and they all sat in this little living room here and listened to the radio.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, to listen to the radio to get scores from around the area.
Was Phelan teaching back then, football?
No, this is farther back than that. But I will tell you a Doug Phelan story. Okay. His dad and my dad were high school kids together in Pawpaw, Michigan.
Oh, very nice.
So it was not an issue hiring Doug Phelan.
Very good.
Yes.
Good teacher. Very good teacher. And
did you know
successful coaching football. So,
and then there was Mark Carroll,
the
baseball coach.
Yeah.
My dad hired him and his wife.
Oh, okay. Great. And there was Duke.
Duke Williams.
So we just lost a couple. What? It's been a couple years now, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, well,
Now I knew Duke pretty well, so I
Nice
still
guy.
communicated with him quite often. I'm trying to think who those football coaches were back then. So what I'm talking about, this would have been like mid 60s.
Oh, okay.
I mean, we're going back in time because
Yeah,
I
that's
graduated
a
in
long time.
71, but
Okay.
and this was before I was in high school.
All right.
I don't know. I think part of my dad's, he wasn't a very materialistic person. You know, he was very happy to live in this home and wasn't out looking for anything bigger and better.
Mhm.
And I think part of that goes back to, I don't know if you realize in World War II, he was a POW. He was captured in the Battle of the Bulge.
Wow.
And my dad probably weighed about 240, he tells me, and he marched from Belgium back to Germany. And he was there for 4 months. He was captured the day before Christmas. And he got out at weighing about 120 pounds.
Oh my God.
Most of the people died of malnutrition because the Germans were running out of gas and food, so they weren't going to pay the prisoners. And I think they ended up with about 500 of them marching, and about 50 of them lived, my dad being one of them.
Wow.
So by the time he got home and started his career, because he had graduated from Western, and so then he got drafted into the World War II.
Okay.
He got out and coached 3 or 4 years down in Hartford and Pawpaw, had real successful football teams. And Gordon Hawkins Elementary,
Right.
told my dad he should come down here and coach. So he showed up here as football coach, athletic director, and that's how it all began back in 1952.
Wow.
I think social studies teacher maybe. I think he did social studies. They did a lot of things back then. Brighton was a whole lot smaller.
Yeah. Well, if any of you have questions underneath where comments are available to make, go ahead and give us a shout out and put your questions down of what you would like to know, or just a thank you, a memory of maybe something personally that happened between you and Mr. Scranton, and I'm sure Cass here will be able to answer most of your questions. So thank you for your time watching us today, and we'll definitely be back with Kaz and more stories about his father, his mom, and life in Brighton back in the day. Thank you for watching Table for Two, and remember, this is going to be on YouTube, so like, share, and most of all, please subscribe. That way you'll be able to see all the Table for Twos. Have a blessed day. Thank you.